live lifelong fulfillment, vision in action. You live lifelong fulfillment, vision in action. Live.
Good morning and welcome to another session of Vision in Action Live. We appreciate you joining us this morning. I'm Jim Boswell. I'm your host, and I'm kind of the instigator of the Lifelong Fulfillment Initiative for Personal Development. I'm also the author of Lifelong Fulfillment, Take Charge of Your Life, and its companion website. Joining us today, as you can see, is Ms. Katrin Becker, personal and business coach, whom we will be interviewing. Grace Simon joins us today as my co-host, and she also is a personal coach as well. On the Vision in Action Live podcast, we focus on expert knowledge and solutions that it takes to build your individual personal development. These are the interconnected solutions that allow you to construct and then achieve the complete vision of your best and authentic life. To do this, we bring you experts in every conceivable discipline to help inform your thinking about your own journey to lifelong fulfillment. Again, welcome to our program today. Today, we're going to hear from Ms. Katrin Becker, personal and business coach. She's the founder of Vision Catalyst Academy and the author of The Voyage and Return, The Path to Self-Discovery. Ms. Becker is a graduate of Colorado School of Mines and SDA Bocconi School of Management, and has 2 decades of engineering and consulting experience prior to being a coach. She empowers women to align their careers with their inner calling. Welcome, Ms. Becker, to the program, and welcome, Grace.
Thanks so much for having me, Jim. It's such a pleasure to see you again and to meet you, Grace.
Yeah. Grace, thanks for joining us today, and we'll get this kicked off. Is there anything in the introduction, Katrin, I might have missed that needs to be available to folks?
Yeah, I'd really like to just add in that one of the focuses that I've been having with the company, which is called Optimize We, and the Visionary Catalyst Academy as a part of that, is also really focusing on retreats as a way to kind of step out of our normal daily routine to really dive deep rather than doing any sort of weekly programs where it fits into your normal life. Sometimes you just need to really break the pattern and mold of your daily life to have that kind of pattern disruptor and have that reset that we all need from time to time.
Right. Okay. Well, good. That sounds like a good process. I've done a few of those, and some of them are pretty good, pretty impressive. So I have a question. In aligning, one of your website discussion points is about aligning core values with professional goals. And I'd kind of like to start with the basics there, because I'm very curious about how you help people arrive at a real genuine knowledge about their core values.
Absolutely. So one of the things is we don't stop to really address that and think that. When we look at a company or an organization, that's something that most companies think about when they're first starting. What is our mission? What is our, mission statement? What are our company values? And kind of having that as far as an entity goes for a company. But we never take time to stop and think of that for us personally. Like, what are our actual values? What is our mission in life? What is our purpose? It's one of those questions that we kind of have as this kind of, up in the air sort of an intangible sort of thing, but we don't take the time to actually sit and put pen to paper and say what that is for ourselves. So I think that that's a really good starting point to kind of understand where we're coming from. I love to use analogies in terms of, what is our kind of destination we're going to? What's our North Star that's going to help get us there? But coming up with what our personal values are is kind of like defining our ship. Are we in a dinghy? Are we in a sailboat? Are we in a yacht? What kind of, ship are we in or car are we in to help get us to where those destinations that we're looking to go to in life? So before you can even figure out what that destination is, you need to figure out where you are now and kind of what your current state is.
I love that so much, Katrin. it's really interesting that that exercise is so uncomfortable for people because, like you said, they'll throw out flippant ideas of what their values should be, what a good person's values truly are. And when you get into the depths of it and understanding that a lot of times, do you find, Katrin, that our values are derived from our environment, how we were raised, how we were raised to believe and to go after and to build our life on. And so, Katrin, how do you take people through that process of discovery, self-discovery of what their values are, which of course are good or bad or neither, that need to be shifted, but they're literally driving their life. So how do you go through that process with people and discovering truly what their values are so that they could really define and discover that true North Star?
I love that you asked it that way because it is uncomfortable for people. And it is so, if you go straight at that question, you will get contrived answers of what we should have. What it means to be this kind of person in this kind of society based on who our family is, how we were raised, our religion. There's all these external factors that help to shape that. And so if you ask that question head on, you won't get actual answers. You will get what people think they are or what they think you want to hear, because a lot of people have people-pleasing tendencies. Mm-hmm. So I kind of back into that question and do it a little bit differently. I have an exercise that I run people through that's called Dream Big. And it's kind of goes along with some of the vision boarding work that I do, but it's just asking them to spend a fictitious amount of money. And it goes up in increments of how much you can spend, and you can't spend it on the same thing. So once you kind of get those sort of like basic needs out of the way, these small amounts, people will take a trip or maybe they'll pay off some debt, and you kind of get to these bigger amounts, then people start spending that on things that are outside themselves. And so once we have this big list of how they would spend their money, if it was unlimited, essentially, because that's what we get to at the end, you can kind of backtrack it that way and be like, okay, what kind of values do you see based on what you would spend your money on? What are the actions you're taking and how you would spend your time and energy and effort? And what are those values? And kind of work backwards to that. And once they have that kind of visual, then they can look back and be like, oh, this is important to me. This is something that I value, but they wouldn't have necessarily gotten there if we had tried to take a direct route to that answer.
Sounds like a good plan. It's been my experience that as I got into personal development, that I had opinions and things that, again, as Grace pointed out, were acculturation. And for me, personal profiles and things like that, because I'm kind of a science geek to some extent, were interesting to me as a counterpoint to what I thought. Some of it matched up, some of it was very dissonant, but it helped me identify it. But I like the fact that you're doing it about money, which everybody sees as an important part of our lives. Mm-hmm. Get the getting of it, the spending of it, and what are the results of it other than just the fact that I have money in the bank. Really smart idea.
It is, because you're uncovering barriers, right, Katrin, through that process, right? Specifically when you're talking about money, you can identify where a person is with their mindset towards abundance, right? Fulfillment,
absolutely,
money, right? And so that I love the process that you take people through in helping them to get a better definitive. I remember when I was doing my I do values-based leadership as well. And so I share with people that it took like 3 years for me to truly define what my values were, because it's unpacking a life.
Yes.
Right? It's I would say, take your time. We're going to do this over a few days, but really it took me a few years of really how I define. Mine is my top 3 values are faith, love, and freedom. And I needed to understand, and I'd love to hear more about what you do, is I needed to understand how those values are working for me and how they work against me. and really
Mhm.
understanding what those values mean and why they're important.
And a lot of times, because of all the cultural aspects and things that are around us, sometimes we dismiss something that is a value for ourselves because we don't feel like it's good enough or right enough or
Oh, so
accepted
true.
enough. And so it is absolutely an iterative process to continue to do this work, because as you start to heal these little bits and remove these, landmines that live in our minds that have been placed there over our lifetime, and we start to remove that, we have a bigger and better and more expansive understanding of who we are, and those values can change. And I think that's another just part of it, is nothing is ever really set in stone. It's always an evolution, and it should be an evolution, in my opinion, of how
Mhm.
we grow and expand. So it's okay to say, okay, this is where we are today, and that's great. And let's look at it again and reevaluate it and see where we are, 6 months from now and a year from now. There may not be any change, but there may be. And we're welcoming that change and embracing it.
That's so good. Powerful, powerful stuff.
So how do you help people? Let's say that we're at that point where we have some notion about what our core values is. How does this alignment to professional goals go with your coaching?
Very rarely. I mean, I was in industry for 20 years, working for corporations and in manufacturing, several different manufacturing facilities, in consulting capacities. And you always have goal settings. And it was always my least favorite part because they felt so forced and so contrived. And very rarely did I feel any personal connection to those goals whatsoever. So they had no meaning to me. So there was no motivation to get them other than, okay, this is like a box to check. So I really love to reframe it as, I'm a human, a full, complete human, whether I'm at work, whether I'm with my family, whether I'm by myself, in all of these places. And so I really work to help set goals that are holistic and looking at us as a whole person. Because if I've got a personal goal at home to maybe be more fit and improve my health, how can that be connected to goals that I maybe have in the business space? Because how you do one thing is how you do everything. And so when we can connect all of those dots for someone, they can start to really habit stack and see how something that they're doing in their personal life can also help them in their professional life, and kind of merge that gap that we seem to create. I think the concept of work-life balance has really done more harm than good for people, because it's putting them in opposition for one another, rather than saying, how can I make all of this marry together and work together?
So that sounds great. My experience has been, being in the corporate world like yourself, is that environment is not always conducive to an easy integration of personal goals and the business goals. I mean, it's pretty simple to say, if I perform well, they're going to pay me well, they might promote me. That's nice. But where the rubber meets the road, how does that work? As you do it in corporations that are interested in doing this integrated approach, or those that are maybe a little bit more resistant, a bit more old school?
The companies that I've been consulting with so far have been open to looking at the goals in a holistic perspective, and have done workshops with different companies. The ones that have been the most receptive to it have been where the employees are kind of more like 1099, a little bit like insurance organizations have been really interested, because they understand in that sales capacity that the ability for their salespeople or their insurance to perform is based on how well they're doing in other aspects of their life. And if they're feeling satisfied and fulfilled at home, they're better employees and they work better. So it depends on the company. So on a company-wide perspective, when I've worked with people, it's been more in that vein. But when I'm working with individuals, we say, okay, what are your goals at work? And how can we align them to what your personal goals are, so that they feel more meaningful to you? So it's a very specific process, with whatever that individual goal is. If it's something like, some sort of monetary financial goal that you have at work, let's dissect that. Let's break it down into its pieces and components. What are the actions that need to happen to make it to that goal, to that result that you want, and kind of breaking it down and looking at it in a more piece by piece function, and seeing what are the activities that are going to align with some of the personal goals, so that it's just more meaningful. It's bringing that connection to it rather than being like, oh, I got to have, 50 million in sales this year. Cool. And just what does that mean? What's that going to be personally when you achieve that? What is that going to look like, so that there's more of an emotional connection to it? And it's not just something that's written on an Excel spreadsheet somewhere or in some sort of software that you then fill out and then you don't look at until 6 months down the line.
Love that, Kristen. What you've been describing is the difference between a human being and a human doing, and getting people off the basis of, I'm a transactional doer. When it should never be separated from everything that you do, because it is all incorporated. When they say a happy wife, a happy life, it's very true. My husband's a general manager at an auto dealership, and clearly I'm sure they could tell if things didn't go well in the morning, we had an argument or something took place, that he would walk into the dealership and he would release an energy, right? He would release something into the environment that people would recognize, whether they see it or not. That energy that he releases is affecting the atmosphere of the corporation. So everything that we do, everything is energy. Everything is energy, and everything moves forward in that energy of how we state our life. So when you are working on this human beingness of a person, and setting their goals, whether it be personal or professional, that it really truly is integrated. When a person has a happy life of fulfillment at home or on hobbies or doing what they really are passionate, love, and do, it gives them that energy and that excitement to go in and be driven to what the goals and the mission and the vision is, in the corporations, whether you're in a dealership or you're in sales or you're in a professional medical field. I just truly believe, and it sounds like you as well, is that it cannot be separated, and we need to do better at teaching that. Research shows that corporations are, their profit margins, their growth substantially moves in an upward direction when the leadership, everything rises and falls on leadership. So when the leadership takes care of the holistic viewpoint of their salespeople or of their organization, that everything has that upward movement of energy growth.
I 100% align with what you said there of everything is energy. And, it's something that even for people who don't necessarily have an understanding of that yet, we all have had an experience where someone walks into the room and the energy changes, whether positively or negatively. Everyone's experienced that. And there's so many examples of those kind of things that we can all go, oh yeah, I've had that happen. I know what you're talking about.
Right.
So the more that we can bring those examples to the forefront, the more people go, maybe there's something to this. I know I was super skeptic. I was so skeptical for the longest time. And it wasn't until I really started thinking about it less from like a metaphysical or kind of, woo-woo point of view.
Yes, it's not woo-woo, right? It's scientific.
It's so scientific. And when I could bring it back and to put it into like physics terms,
right,
inertia and momentum and, all of these things that I learned in engineering that no one questions, and all these, laws of the universe, and bring it back to that, I was like, oh, I get it.
So I have an interesting question for you.
I love interesting questions.
What does it take to become committed to, being good at the imposter syndrome? Because it seems to me that that's an integral part. You're going to have it every time something changes. You're testing new ground, and that's a real strength if we can all master that particular phase of life.
Oh, imposter syndrome.
Can
Oh,
you define what's your definition of imposter syndrome to start from that point, maybe?
I break down imposter syndrome to not feeling good enough. We don't feel enough doing something so that we make it this external event becomes an internal reflection of who we are. And so there's so much of it that comes down to, past regrets that we've had where something didn't go correctly. And I really think a lot of it comes from how we're schooled and this being an A student and having to get everything correct on the first try. Like we don't learn in school how to fail. And so imposter syndrome comes from the fear of failure. We're afraid to try because we're afraid to fail, because we're afraid that that reflects somehow on our internal worth and our external worth, how others see us. So there's so much inner work that needs to occur to overcome that and to separate it into this is a thing that happened. It doesn't have any reflection on my own personal value and what I can bring. So it's a tricky one, but it's an important one. And it's when you're living on those edges. So I like to think of if you're feeling imposter syndrome, that means you're on the edge, which means you're at growth, which means it's a great thing. So you can actually say, hey, imposter syndrome is a signal to me that I am growing and evolving and trying something new outside of my comfort zone. And I personally would prefer to live on the edge of my comfort zone and to always be expanding. So I can reframe it as being something actually positive rather than being like, oh, I can't do this.
True enough. True enough. It seems to me also that once you're a little comfortable, it's time to find another way to reinsert the imposter syndrome for the next set of goals. As long as you know you're doing that, you're growing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then you can kind of be comfortable in that place of not totally being sure and being like, okay, well, this is more of an adventure. It's like that example of when you're traveling someplace you've never gone before. It feels like it takes forever to get there. And then once you're traveling home, you're like, oh, I'm home already. How is it possible that the same trip felt so much longer? But now that I know where I'm going, it felt like nothing. And I think that's imposter syndrome.
I love that. I love that definition of that and the encouragement of reframing people to the mindset of when I'm feeling comfortable, is that growth, right? It's when you're feeling that edge, that uncomfortableness of challenging, questioning about whether you can do it or not, that you're on the edge of growth, that you're on that edge of taking the next step forward, which is so beautiful and motivating for encouraging people to stay in that zone. People in personal development enjoy that zone, right? Of not feeling I don't know if they enjoy it, but they know that they always need to feel where's the least bit of resistance. And I want to look for that resistance because I know in that resistance, I'm growing. And if we're not growing, then you're moving backward. Really, there's no standing forward. So I love that, Katrin. Excellent.
Well, and I love how you said that because there's something in the personal development space and kind of the spiritual space where we talk about being in flow and this idea that everything is going to be like, if we're in flow and we're in alignment, then things should be easy. And if we're meeting resistance, then we're doing something we're not supposed to. And I've always kind of challenged that because then the river would never widen and grow. If you always just stayed in flow, there's got to be times where that river had to still in flow, cut a new path.
Yeah, there's some rapids in that flow. Katrin, on your website, you also talk about trying to quantify results, and you talk about tangible and intangible outcomes. Can you maybe relate our self-assessment, as we go through your process? What should we be looking for? What do you think most people will respond to?
Yeah, well, I think the tangible stuff is usually the things that when people are considering to work with me, that's the things that they go towards. So I have that on there for that because I feel like listing tangible results, it's for people at the beginning of the process. But once you go through it and you're at the end and I ask, how are things going? How are you feeling? How have you changed and grown? It's never about the tangible. It's always about the intangible. But just as a business owner, you can't start with the intangible because people can't relate to that. So I think it's the intangible things that are really, it's hard to describe them because they're intangible. It's this feeling, it's this internal glow that can start to happen for when people start to release the heaviness of expectations and the burdens of others and really get back to their kind of core self. That I think of it as when we see a woman who's pregnant, we describe her as glowing. And I think of that little life being just pure light. And then that's why a woman is described as glowing, because it's coming out of her. And we lose that glow as we get older and we start to bury ourselves. So the real result that I'm trying to go for at any time is to get back to that more pure state of self and get back more to that light.
Okay.
That's beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Getting back to that self-light, don't hide that light under a bushel, let it shine. So you need to find that. And they say in the sales, give people what they want, and then you give them what they need. And as coaches, we always want to help people so much. So you want to just go to the place of need, but you have to give the people, start with the place of what they want, and then uncover and go through the layers of what it is that they need. And that's where you're transforming and really bringing breakthrough to people's lives. So good, Katrin.
Thank you.
So, Katrin, we're coming to the end of our time here. So I wanted to ask if you had any closing comments for the audience and how they might reach you if they're interested in doing more with you.
My closing thoughts are, you are good enough. You were made and created to be exactly who you are. And in the moments where we're not feeling that, that's when you can reach out to someone like me, someone like Grace, someone like yourself, Jim. There's a million people out there who want to make us all be better and kind of raise that level of humanity. So instead of hiding in that shame and guilt and fear, use that as a catalyst to reach out to someone who can help you to be all that you were meant to be and to love and appreciate all the light and dark and all the aspects of yourself. I do individual programs as well as hosting retreats where we can get out of the normal hubbub and rush of our day and really find that time to quiet that noise so that we can hear our internal self a little bit more clearly and really find some quantum leaps in terms of transformation to really find that place of being. So the best way to reach out to me is at optimizewe.com. You can reach out there. I'm also on all of the socials, so you can find me on Facebook, Instagram, or TikTok.
Great.
As well as K-Fred Radio for the podcast that I host as well. Gotta plug that too.
Good. Well, it's been great having your insights on the show today, and we thank you for joining us and look forward to having you perhaps in the future.
I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Grace, thank you so much for joining us as co-host today. It was a pleasure to have you on.
Oh, thank you. This has been so inspiring. Katrin is a bright light, and I feel built up and inspired, and that's what this is all about. So thanks, Jim, for having me on with you and being a part of this interview. It's been absolutely wonderful.
Great. Thank you. You guys have. Well, thank you for sticking with us. I want to thank our guest today, Ms. Becker, and also our co-host, Ms. Grace Simon. And thank you for attending our Vision in Action episode. We hope you found it pretty powerful. I learned a few things myself today. Future episodes that we have planned will look into long-term care strategies for retirees, coaching solutions for individuals and groups, veterans issues, personal finance, divorce, and retirement, just to name a few. So stay tuned for some interesting events. Our podcasts focus on interviewees with subject matter experts and people leading self-directed lives so that you can see exactly what one can accomplish when doing personal development. You can check out the newsletters, podcasts, and extensive reference materials at lifelongfulfillment.com. They're always free to you, and I think you'll be surprised at how much is available to get you started or help you over a rough spot. You can find us on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, and your favorite podcast channel, as well as Cape Red Internet Radio. Again, I'm Jim Boswell, your host. You can reach me at Jim@Lifelong Fulfillment. And until next time, you have yourself
Lifelong fulfillment, vision in action. You left